YouTube, welcome to DigiTales. I'm Olivia and today we're going to be doing a review of one of the new games for 2017, Tales of Berseria. So Tales of Berseria is the 16th game of the Tales series, and it's the first Tales game that has a female protagonist. It's actually the first Tales game I've ever played. I thought I'd give it a go as it's one of the new games of 2017. And it's had some interesting reviews so far and kind of piqued my interest. We are going to be playing it on the PS4 Pro, so we'll see what the graphics are like. In the opening scene, Velvet and her younger brother Laphicet are saved by their brother-in-law Artorias when a scarlet night happens and a demon blight consumes their entire village. Celica, who's their pregnant sister, is killed during an event called the Opening, and then years later we're then taken to a new village where Velvet and Laphicet are living with Artorias, and that's where we first get to know Velvet and her relationship with her family. So as I understand it, Tales of Berseria follows typical Tales games formats in that you have the various different sketches that kind of pop up as you're doing the gameplay. You also have the in-game kind of storytelling that takes place, as well as the action that goes on throughout the game. So when we're first kind of reintroduced to Velvet, and she's a little bit older, I think about the age of 16 as far as I can remember, she is kind of taken through various different tutorials. So you do things like you go through killing balls and you travel through the woods and you go to the site where the big opening event happened, where her sister Celica was originally killed. You kind of get to understand the whole thing around the demon blight and the fear of demons within the village. You see a lot about her character in terms of how strong her family bond is between Artorias and her younger brother Laphicet, and how important that is to her. They follow all these, traditions and what they do in terms of collecting specific types of flowers to bring to Celica's grave on the year of her anniversary of her death. So there's a lot of very kind of sweet moments as well between Velvet and Laphicet, which really helps you kind of feel for the characters, I think, a lot more when the eventual kind of next terrible event happens, where Laphicet is then kind of given to the demons, basically. Sacrificed, that was what I was looking for. When he was eventually sacrificed during the next event known as the Advent. So yeah, so that's generally the first kind of, I guess, first half hour of the game as you're going through those various different bits of the story. So when the sacrifice happens, Artorias also tries to sacrifice Velvet by throwing her into the big pit as well. But she actually comes back as kind of transformed into a demon known as a Therian, and she's got this big demon-like hand, and she basically, her kind of main skill is that she eats other demons, she feeds off other demons, which actually, comes in handy, and it's a pretty cool skill later on in life. But when she first comes out, she ends up killing loads of other demons, and then she tries to kill Artorias because obviously she's full of anger and rage because he's just murdered, sacrificed her little brother Laphicet, who obviously, as we saw earlier on, she loves and adores and looks after and all that kind of stuff. So after this happens, Artorias takes Velvet and throws her into a dungeon for years, and the next time we see her, a few years later, 3 years later, she is suddenly now this really vengeful, grown-up, angry woman that is like a demon and has, basically no clothes on. She's literally wearing nothing but rags. And then suddenly she's kind of saved by Ceres, who was Artorias' Malak, but now she claims to no longer be his Malak, which apparently is confusing because apparently once you're somebody's Malak, you can't not be somebody's Malak, which is interesting. So they save her and then they go and find her some new clothes, which are basically just more rags, but now she has a cape, so she looks cool now. So once Ceres releases Velvet, this is when the real action in the game happens, and you actually start to also get introduced to some more characters. As it's a 4-player game, you do kind of tend to think at the beginning, when are the other characters going to show up? Because I really want to do co-op, because it's fun. So yeah, going through the dungeon was quite interesting. There's more monsters to fight. You get to know the exorcists, who are the main kind of bad guys in the game story, but I think they're supposed to be seen as the good guys, but they're really the bad guys. It's a very interesting story. She also then releases all the prisoners. They all go out. It's chaos. There's demons everywhere. You get to pick up different items. You find more treasure chests and things going on. So yeah, you learn more battle moves. You kind of start to understand what the more kind of complicated gameplay is. It becomes more interesting. You get to fight with Ceres, so then you actually have somebody else on your team. Also makes the battle sequences a little bit more interesting as well. Visually, you get all the cool music that happens. All the cool kind of more rocky music starts to happen during the battle scenes, which we didn't get at the very, very beginning. So yes, definitely I think once you go into the dungeon, it kind of feels like you're kind of catapulted into this more interesting, fast-paced game, more so than what was before, which I think actually represents quite well the change in Velvet's life. So at the very beginning, her life is very slow-paced, and she's in a village with the people that she sees every day, and there's not really much going on than hunting boar and feeding her family. So now suddenly being this kind of vengeful person that's going to be out to kill people and get her revenge on Artorias and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's quite a very interesting contrast once you move into this dungeon scene, and definitely kind of piqued my interest a little bit more and wanted me to carry on. Let's just take a minute to talk about the battle kind of sequences and the gameplay. So I think at the beginning, I was probably a little bit bored. It was kind of tedious, but I know it gets more interesting and complicated later on. So the way it works is obviously you have all these kind of different special moves. You can assign certain moves to certain buttons on the PlayStation controller, whether it's X, O, square or triangle or whatever, which is cool. And you can assign them so that they do certain combos. And I know that obviously later on there are characters that have certain weak points against certain combos, and those work against those. So in theory, later on in the game, I'm sure it becomes a little bit more interesting and strategic how you do the different battle scenes, especially when you have your team around you and more characters. You can swap between the different characters depending on what their strengths are as well, and use their moves to fight against the bad guys, just to make sure you've got, you know, you're using their abilities to the most that you can. But at the very beginning, that's not entirely necessary. And it's kind of the instruction is in the tutorial to kind of choose one of the 4 buttons, kind of press them in whatever order you want to create different combos. So to me that was basically like, okay, so I can just button mash my entire way through the very beginning of the game, which is basically what I ended up doing, and then it became quite boring. So maybe that's my fault for not following, kind of doing the whole trying different moves thing and doing all the different combos and playing around with it, but I kind of got a bit bored, especially when you do one of the very first dungeons, and to be honest, you can kind of just walk past all the bad guys. There's not really any need to fight them, and then when you do fight them, it does go quite quick. So to be fair, it is fast-paced, so that helps, but it did just get really repetitive and yeah, not that interesting. So I'm sure it will improve, and once I've played it for hopefully a few more hours, I will definitely fill you guys in on what I think later on. So once you leave the dungeon, you get on a boat and you travel across the sea. You eventually get shipwrecked in a place called Helaves, I think that's how you pronounce it. And you eventually find yourself doing your first proper quest, which is that you have to go and find this lizard demon guy called Dylan, and you have to kill him so that the guys can then fix your boat and then you can leave and move on with your life. So we get to this village, and it's quite interesting. There's different places you can go, I guess, and run around. There's loads of different NPCs you can talk to. You get to understand a little bit more about the story. You also meet the exorcists, like like Teresa, who's kind of the ice queen of the exorcists for this abbey in this place. Called Helaves, and you understand kind of a little bit more about the people in the area and how they feel about the exorcists. So some people are very positive about them and feel they protect them and have saved them, and other people feel quite negative and kind of just want the exorcist to leave them alone, allow them to get on with their lives. So that's quite an interesting piece. When we go and find Dylan, we do this first quest. I did find it a little bit with the maps and everything. Very, very basic. I mean, we were kind of still a little bit in tutorial stage, so I guess I'll kind of go easy on the makers for that reason. But I mean, the maps and everything, it was literally like point A to point B. There was zero challenge in it whatsoever. The puzzle was push a boulder over. Great. That was really, really boring and really easy. I wanted to do something more. You know, I wanted the kind of the puzzles and everything that you get in like Zelda games. You know, I wanted to really experience some kind of challenge, but didn't get that in this point of the game. I'm hoping this is going to change. So anyway, we go and find Dylan, we're supposed to kill him, and then we don't kill him because, you know, Velvet has her reasons, then we just chop his tail off instead. And then after that point of the game, I had been playing for nearly 3 to 4 hours, so I ended up I was holding up so long. I was so desperate to snooze for ages. Sorry. So then we find Dylan and we're supposed to kill him, but Velvet decides not to for certain reasons, and we end up just chopping his tail off instead, so we can go back to the village people and show that we've killed him by showing his tail, which is, you know, fair. It's a pretty nice thing for her to do, and so far, I mean, Velvet's come across as a pretty ruthless character that will just sacrifice people if it means getting to her end goal, which is obviously killing Artorias. So yeah, I thought it was quite interesting that she actually showed some kind of heart towards this lizard demon character, which was good. That was an interesting part of the story. After that, I turned it off, and honestly, I was kind of thinking, am I really that inclined to want to go back and put in more hours of my life into this game? Maybe not, but I'm going to, because I do want to give it another chance. I want to get all the other characters involved. So I've got my whole team of 5, like obviously we've seen in the trailer, and I'm sure the story will get more interesting and the kind of battle sequences will get more interesting as well. So I will give it another go, but do let me know in the comments, guys. Do you want to see a second episode from us on our thoughts on this game? Have you purchased it yourself? What are your thoughts on the first few hours of gameplay that you guys have experienced too? Because I've still only been out for a couple of days, so I don't know many people that would have finished it at this point. But yeah, love to know your thoughts. Are you gonna buy it? Have you already bought it? Let us know. Before you go anywhere, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You can also check out some more of our videos like this one below. If you want to carry on the conversation, comment below. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.